This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher, as always, for Breaking Down Security.
What's up, man?
Oh, not much. It's been a weird news week. We got the Russians are hacking the DNC, and you've got Redskin, football people taking laptops and throwing them out where hackers can get them, which we're going to talk about later with our guest. As a matter of fact, we do have a guest this week. Everybody, welcome Miss Kim Green to the show. Kim, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Brian and Brian, for having me. It's nice to be here.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Especially since we took so many, as I mentioned before, we've taken such a long time to actually make this happen. So kudos to us.
That's okay. I mean, I'm glad it happened because, a lot of times it's taken us months for some people. I think we had Patrick Haim on, who we talked about earlier, who's a Dropbox CISO or CSO, and took us a while to get him lined out because he's uber busy as well. So it's always good to have people in leadership and of your caliber coming on to discuss things. So,
well, can I embarrass you a little bit and say it's not so much my caliber as that, a lot of CISOs, they don't have a lot of time. Time is precious, right? So
True.
When you think about what, we have the time to listen and look at webinars and podcasts and feeds and the occasional vendor elevator speeches. So when, I find something worth listening to or reading, I'm quite devoted. And I have very much enjoyed your podcast for a long time.
Now, come on.
So, no, it's true. That's how we actually met, because I think I made a comment on one of your last guests.
Okay, the check's in the mail. The check's in the mail. That's cool. Yeah.
Well, us CISOs, we only promote something when there's money involved, right?
That's true. That's right. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background. We always say that most superheroes have an origin story. So we'd like to hear about how you got to be where you're at today.
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know that there is one single super story, but I could probably quickly sum up how I got here, I guess. Well, as you know, I'm the CISO and Chief Privacy Officer for Zephyr Health. And I've been in that role since July of 2014. And I'm also the founder and CEO of CISOaaS Security. And that is a SaaS-based cybersecurity engineering and consulting company specializing in CISO on-demand solutions. And I've been doing that since February 2016, this year. I sit on advisory boards for Authenticate and BugCrowd and NetSwitch. And I have, oh my gosh, I'm old. I'm very old. I have 25 years of experience plus in the private and public healthcare sectors. And I've consulted for numerous healthcare companies, the federal and state government healthcare agencies, and I speak a lot on security and privacy. Mm-hmm. And that's always fun because what a lot of people may not know is that for 2 years, I couldn't speak. So I had vocal cord cancer. So the fact that I can actually speak now and is actually very, very exciting for me. So the other fun stuff, and I don't know how relevant it is, but I'm a mom. Obviously, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, 503rd Combat Support Battalion, 8 years, Desert Storm.
What?
Yeah. And let's see, big outdoor enthusiast. So you'll see me outside much more than you'll ever see me inside. And helicopter pilot. My goal is to retire someday from this wonderful career of security in infosec security and just fly helis all day long.
Wow.
Banjo player, relatively new. That came from the last few years. I just needed to I always say it's my diary. So avid banjo player. Pikiti Tursa. That's a Filipino martial arts that I've been into for the last decade or so, but haven't just kind of took it back up the last year and a half. And lover of Pisco, big time. And that's pretty much it. So that's it as far as who I am, and how I became into security is a little bit different. After I got out of the military back in the early 1990s. I retrained. I was initially an ammunition specialist, so explosive ordnance disposal, and I retrained as a telecom specialist in the Army Reserves. So how I got into that and how I got into computers was I was a telecom specialist and started working for several companies in telecom, eventually moved into desktops and kind of worked my way up. I made, CIO of a healthcare organization in Boston by the time I was 33. I taught network engineering for local colleges. And I think how I got into the security aspect is back in the day, very few companies actually assigned the role of security to an individual. It was very decentralized. And as a CIO, that role was mine. I was the CISO, even if that wasn't really the name that we would use. And so I've always had a passion for computers and network engineering. And security. It's always just been a part of me. I've been blessed because I have I understood ones and zeros, and that's kind of how I got into the business. And what has motivated me and has kept me going is that I know this might kind of sound strange, but it really hasn't been about my own achievements. It's been about helping others. And I'm a big evangelist in helping other people grow in security and IT careers. And I have a cute little story and you might want to hear. And that is back in the day, I was teaching a network engineering class. And I used to get very disappointed because I never had any women in my class. And although I was very used to not having women in the workplace, or even when I was in the military, I always got very excited when I would get a woman in my class. So I remember one time I had this woman, her name was Karen Waters. And I hope it's okay that I use her name. Well, I guess I'll have to ping her after I'm done with this. And anyways, I was so excited. I had a female in the class. Yay. And I remember afterwards, I could see I was losing her. And so after the class, I asked her to come up and I said, how'd you enjoy the class? And she said, it was okay. And I said, well, will you be back next week? And she's like, I'm not sure. And I said, well, was there something that, you're having a hard time understanding? And she said, yeah, actually, there was one part when you started talking about RJ45s and RJ11s, and I don't know what those are. And she was very serious, and it was really, really disturbing to see, that I might lose her. And I said, okay, well, what's your concern? And she said, well, I don't know what they are. And when you were bringing them up, all the men in the class really got it. They understood it. They were talking about it. And I just don't understand. Well, back then, it was very common for IT professionals to carry crimping tools because we made our own patch cables, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I remember going to my bag and getting out my an RJ45 and RJ11 and holding them in my hands and coming back to her and saying, and telling her about how wonderful my career in IT and security has been. And I really know that if she just hangs in there, that she could also have an amazing career, and that most of us do not learn all at once. It's, we don't understand. Oh, wow, we get it. I said, so all I'm going to ask is that you keep hanging on and please come back to class. And I opened up my hand and I pointed to the two little pieces of plastic and I said, Karen, this is an RJ45. It goes on the end of a data cable. And this is an RJ11. It goes on the end of a telecom cable. And I handed them to her. I said, please do not let two little pieces of plastic ruin what can be an amazing career for you. And I said, and by the way, if those guys in the class knew anything about RJ45s and RJ11s, they wouldn't have spent 20 minutes talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, the story is that Karen Waters is now the VP of security for the largest steel corporation in the United States.
Nice.
So, that's when I look back at my career, those are the moments I'm going to remember. And I have several of those stories, believe it or not. And those are the things that I think have kept me impassioned about my career and putting myself out there.
Very cool.
So it was a little long story, but hopefully enjoyable.
Well, Kim, I'm glad you got your voice back because that was a very good story and inspiring, right?
Yep.
And wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let Mr. Betcher go off, but the reason I found you and you, other than reaching out when I was doing my research, is you're one of the first organizations to start a bug bounty program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to ask the question, Mr. Betcher. You've got the first question on this.
Okay. How did that start?
How did that start? Well, interestingly, there were several reasons how that came to be. And one of them was, and I know that this was actually something that I think, Brian, you were interested in talking about, which was the BSOM. I think you found that on the internet and how Zephyr participated in the BSOM study. And so it kind of starts from there, actually. We participated in the BSOM study, which is it's an acronym for Building Security and Maturity Model, for those that aren't aware of it. And we participated in that. And for me, how we came to participate in that is that I find it personally to probably be one of the easiest frameworks for benchmarking organization software security initiatives. So, and I've worked with Sigil for years in regards to employing them to conduct security architecture reviews. And I think they've even filled a few SSG roles when I was at Bosch. And so I had a lot of respect for them as an organization. I trusted their products and services that they rolled out, including the BSOM. And so when we got our BSOM report, it was very clear that there were areas in our security initiatives that we were relatively, we could improve upon, that we weren't doing very well. And I think that's why we do this. That's why you look and have some kind of measurement tool, hopefully, for your security initiatives to see where you're at. And we decided that we needed to step up our certain areas, such as security assessments, architecture reviews, code reviews, and penetration testing. We had employed internal pen testing methods, but we felt that, a more constant and robust external pen testing system was needed, especially since we are a smaller organization. Zephyr is a small organization, has less than 200 people, and doesn't have, the luxury of having, like, say, an internal red team, which I would like to have a purple team. But so we kind of thought about what we wanted to do, and at that time, Casey Ellis, who is the CEO for Bug Crowd, came to pay a visit. And I'm just a huge fan of Casey's, huge fan. And anybody who knows me knows that once I like someone or something, it's really hard for me to let go. I put a real vested interest in people and technology. So he's a visionary. He's just a great guy. And when he started talking about crowdsourcing for pen testing, it just clicked with me. It made absolute sense. I'm looking for an effective and cost-effective solution for pen testing, and to be able to employ, hundreds of security researchers to come and test your systems. I mean, you can't really beat that model. And so we worked with Bug Crowd, and for coming in to help us boost our product security efforts. And I'm not sure what else you want to know about it. You wanted to know about why it's private versus public? Is that the questions? Okay.
Yeah, because Bug Crowd normally does. I don't know if it's something they regularly do, but they have a cadre or a group of people that they turn on to an application. And I don't know if that's what their definition of a private bug bounty is, but private sounds like that you only have like handpicked people, and it's like invite only, and you going into the champagne room and you're getting your you don't publish any. Do you guys do a lot of software development?
Yes, we're a software development company. So,
okay.
As Zephyr Health is. So, private versus public. First of all, I highly recommend, if you've never participated or implemented a bug bounty program, regardless of your size of your organization, I highly recommend that you look at a private bug bounty program first.
Why is that?
Well, because you want to work out the kinks. this is your first time doing it. And if you've selected a particular vendor, I mean, the vendors out there, BugCrowd, Synac, HackerOne, there's some couple others, they each have their own program. They kind of work slightly differently. So you really want to understand how the program works, the platform, get a good understanding of that. And I think the best way to do that is kind of in private, and then once you're very confident, comfortable about the bug bounty program, then by all means, the goal should be to open it up to the public. For us, we started a private because we wanted to, we didn't know what we were going to find in our system, right? I mean, we know there's stuff in there. We didn't know what we were going to find. We didn't know what they were going to find. And we wanted to make sure that whatever they found, we could address in a timely manner. And there's always that fear, well, what if we can't? And, we have the same fears as anybody else who's starting out. Bug bounty is relatively new, and there's a lot of people out there that have very strong opinions one way or the other. I have a very strong opinion that is very favorable for crowdsourcing technologies, but I know a lot of people don't. And part of the concern is, well, how do you know what they're doing when they're in there? And well, there are means of monitoring. They require other tools, but you could monitor. I mean, technically speaking, you could monitor their activity, not with the platforms that I think that the crowdsourcing vendors provide, but with other tools, other third-party tools, if that was really important to you. But so there's that, and we just wanted to get comfortable. We want to get comfortable with the security researchers and the quality and all that good stuff. So we did keep it private, and I got to tell you guys, it was hands down one of the best experiences I have ever had in my career. The people are amazing, and the security researchers, the quality of them are top notch. They really are. And certainly there's probably going to be a few out there, bad apples. Maybe they aren't that good, but you know what? You can find those in traditional consultancy companies. You can find them in-house. So that argument to me is moot, to be quite honest. And I really love the fact that there's this sense of competitiveness, this I don't know, esprit de corps kind of thing too, where they all recognize they're a part of a very unique group and community. But at the same time, there's this competition amongst themselves to be the best. And I really like that. I like that model. I like that gung-ho kind of attitude. So, and they came in and I can't say the name of the organization, but we had hired other companies, another third-party company to do pen testing. And while they did find some stuff, they didn't find the P1s that were found by BugCrowd.
Sure.
So that's kind of a big deal. Sure. And that, by the way, that P1 was significant enough that had it been exploited, it would have brought us down. And no one knew it was there. I mean, how can you know? You just don't. No matter how many times you look at something, I can assure you're going to miss it. So having so many people look at it, hopefully they're bound to find more things than you ever possibly could in-house.
Yep. What's a P1? Is that a priority one, or?
Yes, I mean that. I don't think it's every organization is probably slightly different, but the general term amongst vulnerabilities, and when you're dealing with critical vulnerabilities, is a P1, priority one, something an organization usually wants to take care of immediately, because in essence, it doesn't get worse than that. It means they have compromised your system in its complete entirety. And how do I say this politely? They own you.
Total ownage, yeah.
They own you.
Unauthenticated RCE, pretty much, to the kernel. Yeah.
So one of the downsides of bug bounties is there could be so many false positives, and the effort to disprove a false positive is exponential compared to the effort to find a false positive, right? For lack of a better term. How do you get around that?
Okay, well, actually, that is one of the reasons why crowdsourcing vendors are really taking off and doing and are so popular right now, because a lot of organizations who implemented internal or in-house bug bounty programs, we're having to deal with these issues of all this noise, triaging all these submitted vulnerabilities and then just all the noise around it. It's a big burden, administrative burden. And so thus was born crowdsourcing vendors. and creating the platforms in which they themselves are doing the triage. So when the vulnerabilities are submitted, they're submitted, in our case, they were submitted to BugCrowd. BugCrowd then, they have an incredible in-house security engineering team, and then they look at the submission, and they themselves, it goes through, again, a validation process. And if they think that, this sounds like it is an issue and it's real, then they forward that to us. So they're cleaning it up. We're not looking at it. So, and I can tell you it works, because for every submission that got through to me, I would say, I remember going to Black Hat last year and listening to, was it LinkedIn, who was talking about their internal bug bounty program, and they had a lot of noise. And for every, one legitimate or valid submission, there was like 5, 10 that weren't. And that wasn't the case with us. For every valid submission, maybe we got a few that were, not valid. We didn't get any duplicates, which was really nice. So they really did a good job on that.
Very cool.
So did they exploit them?
No, that's really up to us to do that. What they have to do is, obviously BugCrowd doesn't have access to our system, so they're not actually going in and exploiting it. But the security researcher has to be quite detailed in their submission and their report, so that when a bug is submitted to us, a vulnerability is submitted to us, that our in-house team could then, try to exploit the, to validate it through our own process, following what they've done, and try to exploit it ourselves. And it was never an issue. Every time something was submitted, all the P1s and the P2s, we were able to do exactly what they did and come to the same conclusion.
Very nice.
Wouldn't it be best to first do like a super awesome code audit? Seems like you would find a lot of things that wouldn't even make it, or find things that could have been exploited that maybe hackers couldn't find initially. Through.
You're spot on. That you're talking about security by design now, right? And layers of security. And the reality is bug bounty programs do come at the back end. And ultimately, you don't want to find P1s and P2s. You're hoping you don't. But the ideal situation is that you have developed, your security development lifecycle is so mature that you've implemented all those layers of security. So you've done your code reviews, your security architecture assessments. You have a dynamic pen testing in place, vulnerability scans, everything. You name it all, and it's all there. And it's being done. And as bugs are being found, they're being fixed. And at the same time, you're training your coders and your programmers, your engineering team on, what they found. And this is how you, code against it, because you don't want to see this same bug repeat itself over and over and over again. And that's exactly what's going to happen if you don't retrain your coders and your programmers. So what you're saying, what you're suggesting is absolutely correct. But here's the thing. Most companies are so far off from that, because we're still, the majority of companies that are software company, development companies, they're startup companies, or they're small businesses. And they haven't really understood yet that security is just, in my mind, a subset of quality, and they haven't quite understood that. So their focus is still on functionality and features. And sadly, when I interview software programmers today, especially the ones coming right out of college, because I am part of the interviewing process, I will ask them very basic questions such as, what does secure coding mean to you? And they don't know. They don't even know what I'm asking. Yeah. And it's frightening to think in this day and age that we are producing a bunch of programmers that don't know what that means. And so if I say, I could mention the word OWASP to them and they have no idea what that is. So we have a long way to go before we can, just say, well, wouldn't it be great if we did all these other things? Because ideally, those are the things we should be doing. And yet it's going to take a long time before we get there. And that's all part of the security maturity model of that's implemented in an organization.
Yep.
So the advice from you might be, you want to start a bug bounty program, or you want to hire one of these firms like BugCrowd? Well, have you ever done a code audit? For security?
Oh,
Have you
yeah.
ever hired a consultant? And if
Right.
not, then yeah, do that first. Don't even think about
Right.
going
And
to step 10 without doing step 1.
Right. And I think a lot of organizations, do that. I do think that before they just start a bug bounty program, that hopefully they have implemented some kind of, especially external testing or review of their products. And I do think that a lot of organizations do that, at least components. They'll have certain components reviewed. I wouldn't say they do the full architecture review, but then the other thing is you're looking at crowdsourcing vendors and technologies, and they're not only interested in bug bounty programs and vulnerability disclosure programs. They are really trying to connect with other security vendors and expand. And I think that that's the fun thing right now, is watching and seeing, well, how can crowdsourcing be used in other means and other ways, not only for bug bounty. And I think we're going to see a lot of new things come about, a lot of new services that are going to be provided by crowdsourcing vendors that will address some of the issues in the beginning of product design and not towards the back end.
Yeah, so they're going to start swimming upstream, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And if they don't, well, I'm going to be upset because I sit on the board for Bug Crowd, and I want to see them do some amazing things, and I know they can't. So,
well, that's cool. That's actually, talking about software security, that's kind of a good segue to our next little topic we wanted to talk about. I found this article on Dark Reading about how the HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accessibility Act.
Accountability.
Damn. I didn't have
so close.
Yeah.
Close.
But how HIPAA security is kind of lagging behind. And I took parallels to HIPAA and PCI. In our show notes, because I was like, well, PCI was created in 2004 and HIPAA was conceived in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
But it appears that PCI is further along with regard to how they interact with the entities that follow PCI, some of them actually being hospitals as well. But it appears that like HIPAA has an issue or hospitals have an issue getting HIPAA compliant, and it doesn't seem to make hospitals any less vulnerable to breaches. And since you run a company that does CISO as a service, or I have another question about the difference between that and a virtual CISO, but what's the reason that HIPAA seems to it appears to lag behind PCI adoption. Where is it more difficult to be HIPAA compliant than it is PCI?
No, that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
But there are so many factors to consider, Brian. The question you are asking is like the age-old question, and there are so many things that I can respond to, and I will try to do that. First of all, we need to understand that when HIPAA came into place in 1996, there was no enforcement aspect of that law. So it was kind of the honor system. And it was, hey, healthcare industry, we want you to comply with these various security and privacy, or security safeguards and privacy components. And for a long time, you could get away with not doing it because there was no enforcement agency that was out there auditing. Mm-hmm. Even though there was a criminal and civil liability aspect applied to it, so that if you were found guilty or you were prosecuted and found guilty as an organization or individual, there was a penalty, published penalties for those, but there still was no enforcement agency. And that all changed in 2009 with HITECH. Mm-hmm. And when HITECH came out, which I'm trying to remember, what does HITECH stand for? Health Information Technology. It was part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. But anyways, and so when it came out, it actually gave, and this is where you always hear HITECH gave HIPAA teeth.
Yep.
And that is when the enforcement piece was entered and applied to HIPAA, which said, okay, now the Office of Civil Rights is now responsible for investigating, auditing, and pursuing prosecution over, HIPAA cases, complaints. In addition to that, what a lot of people may not understand or may not know is that the federal government also extended the right for HIPAA, for companies or organizations who violate HIPAA, that the state attorney general's office could also prosecute HIPAA cases. Mm-hmm. And that is a big deal. And why is that a big deal? Because the deal that was made with the federal government is that certain monies that are obtained through, the prosecution can be kept by the state. So now imagine you're a state attorney, and you go after all of the or some organizations in your state that have been found, or you perceive them to be, in violation of HIPAA. If it's found that they are, a portion of those of the money, the penalty money, goes to the state. So it now becomes the line item of revenue. So it's a little bit scary. I mean, in some ways, because I'm not always a big fan of using monies that are, found or come out of audits and stuff like that, penalties, as a form of revenue for a state. Because then I think that states get used to it and there's pressure on them to, and that makes the always a little nervous. But
we're in the red. We need to audit heavy.
Our state budget is short, $30 million this year. By the way, are there any HIPAA cases we can go after?
Well, when I first started doing, I did a stint as a healthcare consultant doing audits and stuff. I understood that the OCR, when they would do those, when they would, audit people and find them, guilty for all intents and purposes of not following, HIPAA, high tech, meaningful use stuff, the fines from those would actually go to help fund more audits, so that the OCR would be self-sustaining at that point, with the number of audits, which it did seem kind of like, well, you only do so well depending on how much money you've got. So you're going to have to dig as deep as you can to try to find as much stuff.
Right. There are so many issues with the whole auditing aspect of, data protection laws. I mean, it's the whole auditing world in general I have issues with. I mean, I've always had issues when, as an organization, you're employed in an auditing firm and paying them. Because, obviously they want to be invited back next year. You don't think that's a conflict of interest slightly?
Sure.
And it's the same way with the government entities that are auditing. It's really hard to have the OCR come after you and punish you, penalize you for being out of compliance with something when you look at the way that they themselves are maintaining their own data. Some of the biggest breaches have come out of the government. So now you start to get this kind of attitude, do as we say and not as we do. And their credibility starts to kind of, go down a bit. So I think, I don't know, it's, and then also, and this is kind of off topic a bit, but it's concerning to me when I look at any type of, these types of certifications, even with PCI, because now, I happen to know for a fact there are organizations that have had some serious breaches and they have not reported them because somehow in their mind they have qualified that it didn't count as a breach or a reportable breach. But it did. It absolutely hands down did. And so then the people who are stepping up and reporting, self-reporting breaches are really heavily penalized. And I just, I'm not sure we're creating the right environment. So the companies who have had internal breaches and are definitely, they should be reporting them. They're big breaches and they should be reporting, are not. They're able to kind of sweep it under the carpet, even though they're PCI certified. While other organizations are coming forward and saying, yes, we had a breach and this was going on. And by the way, now they're going to get penalized pretty well. So yeah, the whole landscape right now is, this is probably why they're coming out a little bit and investigating, PCI auditors and how are they actually auditing the companies and what are they looking at? Because something's just really off. Something's very off.
Yeah, they fixed a lot of that stuff a couple of years ago. Meaningful use was a big one back when I was doing that stuff. And
Have you
if you
figured
didn't,
that out yet?
yeah, well, if you didn't pass your meaningful use audits, they, basically it forced you to pick an EMR. There were only like 2 or 3 EMRs out there. So, obviously those people who work in the government are now working for probably those EMR companies.
Right.
And it was almost like a form of extortion, I think, because it forced you to buy technology that you maybe didn't necessarily need at the time. And if you didn't have it, they withheld all your Medicare and Medicaid payments that you would get from your patients if you didn't qualify under meaningful use type 2 or type 3.
And that's interesting because, and you were mentioning about why, healthcare is kind of software security is lagging. I mean, another thing that's really important for people to understand, and I think unless you're in the healthcare industry, most people, especially in the security field, don't understand this. But I think we continue to fail to recognize that the majority of U.S. hospitals in this country, or U.S. hospitals, are running in the red. And security and compliance dollars are not as abundant as one might think. So for a long time, basically since the beginning of time, hospitals, the emphasis has been placed on funding compliance, not security. And we all know that the two are not the same. So the emphasis is becoming compliant in GXP and HIPAA and all of these other things that they have to comply with, both to do, to accept funds from the U.S. government or to contract with, another business, or even the insurance payer putting some type of requirements on them from a compliance perspective. So all the emphasis has been put on compliance, not security. And so therefore we have a lot of products in the healthcare industry, especially in the hospitals, where you have just a bag of networked products and systems, some legacy, some cloud-based, that are just not secure. And there's no way that the hospitals have the internal staff to do the proper assessments during a due diligence process to make sure that the products they're using are secure. So it's just it's another almost sick cycle of, why we keep blaming hospitals when the reality is, come on, we need to start looking at ourselves. We have as citizens, we have there's an accountability aspect for us as well. We're not, if your hospitals are running in the red and then you're shaming them for not being secure, something's wrong there.
Do you think some of the onus falls upon device manufacturers and like my wife had to go to the hospital about a year ago, and I'm pretty well up on what's going on with devices and vulnerabilities, and I sit there and she's getting an IV, and the infusion pump she's using is the one that was just in the news about having an open telnet port and unauthenticated access. Do you think that hospitals should push back on device manufacturers and go, okay, we can't be secure unless your stuff is secure?
Should hospitals?
I would assume they have the power since they're the ones buying the product.
Yes and no. Okay, so this comes back to another reason why software security is lagging in hospitals. When you talk about healthcare providers, okay, for a healthcare provider, their primary purpose, is to treat a patient, to deliver health services, right?
Sure.
So if you are an ER doctor and, their priority is to save a life, and that means in some cases seconds. And to be quite honest, at that moment, they could give a damn about security. And that is the mentality in a hospital. Healthcare providers, it's not that security is not important to them, but overall delivery of health services is their priority. And the two just don't always align very well. So that has also been a reason. So if you're asking the hospitals, which are staffed with healthcare providers who are ultimately making decisions about the products they want to use, they're usually basing their decisions off of how does this increase our performance for delivering health services, not how secure is this product. So you're probably asking the wrong people to push back. What needs to really happen, and not to mention, again, you're talking about hospitals that are not very well funded. So really, I think that the commitment needs to come from the manufacturers themselves. And I think a lot of that comes from, I kind of have a saying, and I used to always say this, cybersecurity also means being a good cyber neighbor, right? And as we're moving into the cloud, there's just not enough tools right now out there to really be able to validate the security of some of your vendors. It's still very trust-based. You still get that 100-question, Excel spreadsheet. Fill this out. Are you secure? Throw us some of your policies and procedures. Maybe show us your last vulnerability scan. But other than that, it's very, very, very trust-based. And so it's very easy to sit there and tell someone that you're secure. And the only way they find out you're not is when all of a sudden, you have a breach. And I want to tell you a story, but I'm not really certain. I like to be very open. I'm trying to be very transparent, but I at the same time never like to embarrass people who don't deserve to be embarrassed. So I want to tell you a story because I think it's important and I think it's relevant to what you're asking. When we had our first bug bounty program, because we're now on our second one. When we had our first bug bounty program, and you were asking me why it's important to do private. Well, part of it is during the scoping process, what are you going to leave in? What are you going to leave out? Hopefully you pretty much open it up wide open because you want them to look at everything. Well, when we created the environment for, the researchers to test in, we didn't sanitize our testing environment as well as we should have. And in that process, somewhere there was a hard-coded reference to a third-party vendor. And of course, when you open it up wide open, they don't know, right? So it's in there. So they actually started going after kind of that third-party vendor that was referenced in the, that was available in the environment and that they'd seen in the environment. And now they didn't do anything bad. They just, it was a basic testing, did a little fuzzing, a couple, tried to do some SQL injections and stuff like that. But what ended up happening is, when I won't say who that third party vendor is, but what ended up happening is that it did bring down our site. I mean, our database and their product. And their, so their CISO and their CEO were on the phone with me very quickly. And I spent about 10 minutes listening to them. I would say, can I use the word bitch me out? I think I can on the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
So I listened to them for 2 minutes. Now, anybody that knows me knows I'm incredibly thick-skinned and I pretty easygoing at the same time. So I listened for a good time while they were very upset, and they had good reason to be upset. And that's fine. And then when they were all done, I asked them, I said, are you done? And they said, yes. And my response was this: okay, you son of a bitch. And I was furious.
All right.
Because the reason why is that during the due diligence process, you swore to me that your product was secure. You swore to me. We spent hours on the phone and you telling me how secure your product was. And I just proved that you don't even do the most basic sanitization of your front end. So you know what? You can thank me for the $17,000 of free pen testing. And that was the end. And we no longer do business with them.
Very nice.
You get my point? So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, maybe they had a right to be upset, but they would never have been in that situation if they had been honest with me up front. Sure. And really, and during the due diligence process, explain to me maybe their security posture wasn't as mature as they led me to believe. That's wrong. In the cloud, we need to be very transparent. We need to be honest. I work with vendors. If there's a vendor that I really want, a business unit, the company really wants to bring on their product, and maybe they're not secure as I'd like them to be, or they don't meet our minimum requirements. I've always said, I'm not there to say no. I'm there to tell you what the risk is. And if a business unit really wants them, I want the business unit to understand what the risk is. And then I want to work with that vendor to help them, bring up their security posture. That's what I want. And that comes through honesty and transparency. And that's not going to happen if everybody is afraid to talk about where they are security wise, because they're afraid their contract's not going to sign or a deal's not going to get done. And that just has to stop. Otherwise, we're never going to get to where we need to be. So that's my little story. And I've not mentioned that before. So I'm going to be interested to see what the feedback is from that.
Well, only the people who are involved with that will actually know who it is. You're not going to hear and they have to listen to the podcast too. So if you don't tell them it's on the podcast, they won't hear it.
And the only way they probably listen, I mean, I just recently started kind of getting on Twitter. I'm not big on social media. I did have a Facebook account like for a few years, came off of that last year though. I just not really into it. But I do the Twitter thing and LinkedIn. So, but I don't have a lot of followers, so I don't, we're good.
Oh, don't worry. We have about 10 downloads, so you'll get about maybe 5 or 6 new tweeter followers there. So, you got that going for you. So, so you mentioned that hospitals are operating in the red. Is that why they reach out to a company like CISO Security for their CISO as a service? And I wanted to ask about how does this differ from a virtual CISO, which I've heard other consulting companies discuss about?
Well, I don't think hospitals would necessarily, they may, I don't think that they'll necessarily reach out for a company like CISO, where they're seeking CISO on-demand solutions, because I'm assuming in most cases, especially under HIPAA, they are required to have a CISO. At least they're, it's under HIPAA, they are required to have a chief security or a security officer and a privacy officer. So they already have that expertise in-house. So it's not likely they would use a company like CISO. CISO is very interesting in how it started out. It started out, and it's kind of, there's two sides to CISO, but the first part is there's the product side, which I won't talk about because right now we're kind of in stealth mode. But I think we are creating a pretty neat product that is going to help a lot of companies automate security requirements and try to understand what those requirements are in the early stages of development. Right now, it's kind of at the product team. At that point, it's already too late. This is going to a much higher level. This is going to sales, marketing, understanding where you're doing business and what are the requirements for doing business in this country. And okay, you want to sell to Salesforce.com. This is what's going to be required. So it's a whole different way of looking at things, but it's kind of in stealth mode right now, pending the patent process. The service side, which is the top part that we're talking about, this was an idea kind of that came to me because what I was realizing is that there are these SMBs, these small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, startup companies who really, they need to have a CISO, but they don't have a full-time CISO in-house. And that's usually because there's like either a cost due to cost or a lack of availability. For example, the average CISO in San Francisco makes over $400,000 a year.
Hello.
And now, don't everyone get excited about that because you don't know what my mortgage is.
Yeah, I was going to say it's about a 500 square foot house.
Right, exactly. So, but it's all relative, right? But still, that's the average pay. And for some of the larger companies throughout the nation, I mean, the salaries for CISOs are $1 million plus. So, if you're a small, medium-sized business or a startup business, you can't afford that kind of salary. But these organizations do understand that there are many benefits of access, of having access to experienced CISOs, especially at critical junctions in the business decision-making process. In regards to the CISO, that's kind of how I mentioned, is that when we started in February, we started with 2 companies. And 4 months later, we have 11 customers throughout California, and we have a network of 7 senior-level experts and CISOs from Fortune 1000 companies. We've all come together. And some of us, such as myself, have been even at the helm of holding a CISO position during a very high-level and visible breach, which if you went to Black Hat for a few years ago, I was a CISO at the time when they had the breach at Bosch. And that's not something you would normally I would never have been able to market that as a positive a few years ago. But times have changed. And that's because, companies, the leaders of companies now realize that they want people who have experienced these kinds of breaches because they want to know they can rebound from a breach. And they want that seasoned and wise individual to lead them through what can be a very dark time for a business. And so our customers right now Most of them have come to us through the venture capitalist BP, Kleiner Perkins, or KPCB, Kleiner Perkins. And I think primarily an effort to protect their investment. It's by ensuring that they have access to security and compliance experts, and to prevent what is, I think, quickly becoming very prevalent in the SMB market, which means that you have hundreds of startups and small businesses that now have access to millions of dollars because of the venture capitalists, but yet they have very little understanding of security and compliance requirements. They're easy targets for hundreds of security vendors. And one thing is, I love all the new vendors that are coming out. I think they're awesome, but some of them are posers. I'm just going to put it out there. So, they're going to come in, they're going to fix everything, and they're going to take all that money. And at the time, those, millions of dollars seems like a lot of money, but, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's what these companies are doing. And in the process, they're becoming overly compliant, but not necessarily secure, or it's the other way around. They're implementing security, but they're not compliant. And the balance is key. And startups and SMBs struggle finding that balance. And the role of security and compliance is usually assigned to the most technical person in the organization. And that's a costly mistake. The result is, because usually there's going to be a fast burn rate of their security dollars. There's still going to be a lack of confidence in their overall security and compliance posture and their ability to deal with real cyber threats. And I can guarantee you there's going to be an increase in security debt, especially if they're a software or a manufacturing company. And I can give you examples of why, and my company is not the only company that's taken off. I have networked with 3 to 4 other CISO on demand providers, Lou Raban, Kip Boyle, Jean Leboff. We've all coming together to do this because we are passionate that we want to help companies be secure without them being taken advantage of. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients, big a manufacturing company here, a medium-sized company, don't have a CISO. They're getting ready to sign a contract with a company. It's a big contract, and they got hung up in their due diligence process. The company didn't want to sign because in their mind they thought that they were commingling data, and they weren't. But the security people, or the people that were talking on my client side, and the security staff at their company, they weren't talking the same language. We went in there, 22-minute phone call, done deal. Because we're experienced enough to not get caught up in that security control talk. You come at it with, what is your business risk? What is your security risk? What are you concerned about? That's where you start the conversation. And, if you don't have that wisdom and expertise, you don't know that, and you can get all confused. So anyways, done deal, 22 minutes, signed contract, they're happy. The other company that we do business with is a consultancy company, was pressuring them to become compliant with Privacy Shield. And if you know Privacy Shield, that is the proposed regulation or proposed program for replacing Safe Harbor. Well, the thing is, it's not been approved. It's not been adopted. And I can tell you, because I have an immense amount of experience with European data protection laws, especially in Germany, it's not going to come into play anytime soon. And I think I probably won't pass the European Court of Justice. So to come in and put pressure on a company saying you have to comply, and have them spend $100,000 to become certified in a framework that isn't even adopted, talk about
may never be.
That may never be, was just really disturbing. So I said, no, stop. No, you're not doing that. The other one was a company that recently became SOC 2 certified. And I said, and I remember during our interview when we were talking, I asked them, well, which trust service principles did you become certified in? They couldn't tell me. So here's a company that just spent $100,000+ getting their SOC 2 certification, and they don't know what they got certified in. So something is very, very wrong here. So why is the CISO on demand really important? Because we're going to come in and we're going to help you implement the security programs. We're going to help you decide on which third-party security products and services to use, such as external pen testers, security assessments, managed security services, security audit and certification providers. We're going to help you. Why? Because we've been using these guys for years. We know who are the quality providers and vendors and who are the ones that maybe you should stay away with. And we're not afraid to express that opinion because we're old.
Well, there you go. There you go.
So there you go.
Very nice.
It comes back around to that, huh?
It sure does. It comes to get
We've
to a
got
certain
experience.
Like, you know what? I'm sorry. This has been my experience with you. So,
yep.
You know.
Well, it's very nice. Yeah. So, I mean, you said these are CISOs. Are these people are actually working CISOs at their own companies, and you just bring them in an advisory role?
Some of them, yes. Not all of them, but some of them either, were previous CISOs at Sony Pictures and Blue Shield of California, myself, Bosch, PIMCO up in Seattle, actually, in your area. Okay. Insurance. Yeah. So we've all held these positions and so we're very experienced and very wise. And at least I'd like to think we are. I mean, I hope that doesn't sound egotistical. That's not the point. There's a difference between, experience and wisdom. And I like to think that everything that we've been through combined as a community, CISO community, we have an immense amount of wisdom.
That CISO from Sony, that person's got some thick skin. I can tell you that right there.
So we're all going to make a difference, and we're proud of this. And obviously business is just taking off like crazy. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, I had no idea it was going to go this well, to be honest. And so we're excited about that. And the CISO networking group is getting larger by the day. We have 2 new CISOs that just came on board today. And so we're all working together to make the world a better and more secure place.
Well, that sounds sort of ideal, depending on the situation, because this CISO for hire thing, that could make or break a company's success.
Absolutely.
If they make a wrong decision near the beginning of their,
And they always do, Brian. They always do, because I remember when I came on board, I remember during one of my first meetings, I said, where do you think, asking everybody in the company in one of our meetings, where do you think security starts? And someone then would say, well, with the developers, engineers, some would say product. Some would say, I said, well, you know what? It starts in the marketing. It starts in that area of, okay, who are you building a product for? Who do you want to sell your product to?
Who is our audience?
Yes, because if you don't understand their security requirements, then it's a problem. And I'll give you an example. A lot of these startup companies, they have a very high, very low tolerance, very high risk tolerance. So they're willing to take maybe some shortcuts or maybe not implement all the security requirements they can because the money is not necessarily there, and they'll make up for it down the road because they haven't quite understood security debt yet. So their mindset is just build the product and get out the door. But what they don't realize is that they don't understand their customer, such as, okay, and I'll give you an example. So, and this is not to say this is the case with Zephyr, but this would be a good analogy. Zephyr is a relatively young company. Okay. And there's no reason why they wouldn't have a high appetite for risk, because that's the norm for a company that size. But they're doing business with life science companies. Their customers are Genentech, Medtronic, and those companies have a very low tolerance for risk. So when you go through the due diligence process, which you will go through, at the 11th hour, and let me tell you, when I was the CISO at Bosch, I killed a lot of deals because of the fact that they didn't meet our minimum security requirements. And it was sad, but we had a low tolerance for risk. So that was it. So you get there and you're so excited. You spent 9 months in the sales cycle and you can't wait. You're going to cut the deal. And all of a sudden, sorry, you don't meet our minimum requirements. So we can't sign a deal with you. Well, you should have known what their requirements were before you got to that stage. And so our thing is helping marketing and sales team develop the marketing collateral that they need to understand security so they can have that conversation at a high level. Our marketing and sales folks should not walk into a sales call or meet with a customer or potential customer. And when the customer says, so how do you do security? And it will come up in the first hour that you've met. And they look at you like you have a third eye. So that should no longer happen anymore.
You make them more than booth babes. They actually need to know something.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right on.
Absolutely.
So we've gone through a lot of time here. I want to get to the Redskins laptop thing only because I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. I went to the ISSA meeting up here in Puget Sound last night, and I hadn't even heard of this. And I didn't even know that the NFL has issues with that kind of stuff, with health data contained in laptops. So the story is that this trainer has player data from any player that has gone to the NFL Combine, which is they show their skills off pre-draft to make themselves look better for the upcoming draft. And so this trainer for the Redskins had his laptop, some removable drives, a couple thumb drives and stuff in a bag in his car in DC, and it got taken.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these players, playing or not, that have gone through the combine from 2004 to 2016, they're talking like tens of thousands of NFL players here. And this is all HIPAA stuff because it's all medical information. How are they allowed to get away with this?
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, it's very important to understand it is not HIPAA stuff. Know it is not HIPAA stuff, and I wanted to clarify that because HIPAA, under HIPAA, you only fall under HIPAA if you are a covered entity or a business associate. So if you are a hospital, a health insurance, payer, or a clearinghouse, which is a business that is provides some kind of claims processing service for the insurance company or hospitals. Those are considered covered entities. And a business associate is an organization that contracts with a covered entity, or even another business associate of a covered entity, providing services that would have them have access to protected health information, PHI. So HIPAA only applies to covered entities and their business associates. So what happens then when there is a breach of health information and it does not fall under HIPAA? Well, and many people don't know this, but this is what happens. It falls under the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. So in the case with the Redskins, most likely the FTC will investigate it and decide whether or not they want to pursue some type of criminal or civil actions towards them. And what happened is back in 2009, when they came out with high tech, they came out with two versions, and they're exactly identical. If you pull the actual document up, you'll see they're identical. Almost word for word, but there is the high tech. There's a version for FTC, and there's a version for the HHS, Health and Human Services. And so under HIPAA, the HHS version is applicable, and anything that's not any breach of personal information that sits outside of HIPAA, it falls under the FTC. So if you are like, for instance, if you're Google Health. Let's just say, Google has a breach of your health data, their software, and all that good stuff. And there's an issue. The FTC is going to come and investigate that. My biggest concern is I laugh almost. It's not a funny issue, but it's just mind-boggling to me that so many companies can be so easily taken in when you have all these companies out there. There's software companies, container companies, all this stuff that are saying they're HIPAA compliant companies. They're not. They're not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's just really getting my goat, to be quite honest, because, this comes back to that whole thing, being a good cyber neighbor. If you're selling your product, saying you're a HIPAA compliant product, but you clearly don't even know what that means, then there's a problem, because you should be able to know, whether or not HIPAA applies to you or not. And so that's kind of what's going. So I would imagine the FTC will investigate that incident and determine whether or not charges need to be brought against the Redskins.
And is it very similar to how HIPAA is now, where they could several $1 million of fines or and they okay.
Mm-hmm. But HIPAA is a little bit scary, and that's under high tech. But HIPAA can be even scary, and this is a little fun fact that a lot of people may not know. There are two data protection laws in the world that will hold an individual directly, or can hold an individual directly responsible for a breach that's found to be negligent, or a negligent breach. So if I'm a company, if I work for a hospital and I'm their chief security officer, and there is a breach in my hospital, And it's found that we did not employ, what would be considered the, minimum security requirements. I can be held personally responsible, both criminally and civilly, and cyber insurance will not cover that. So when you when you're looking at, where does your CISO sit, you better make sure that she or he sits at the very top, because they can go to jail for you. And I hope everyone that works at a hospital or a health payer or a clearinghouse understands that. And the only other company or the only other country in the world that will hold an individual directly responsible is in Singapore. Wow. And then there's one country in the world that actually has a law that prevents that from happening. So you cannot hold the designated CISO or privacy officer directly responsible for a breach. And you'll never guess what country that is.
The U.S.
Britain?
No, because remember, U.S. is one of the countries that says, right. We're going to hold you responsible. Forget the fact that you sat 3 layers deep in your reporting structure. You're responsible.
Well, in that case, I'd say Britain.
No, actually, it's Germany.
Germany?
Yeah. And the BDSG, which is their national data protection regulation, it states that you cannot, in the case of a data breach, you cannot hold the designated CISO directly responsible.
There you go.
So so it's just a little fun tidbits there.
Very cool.
Of information.
Okay. Well, Mr. Betcher,
I'm going to need that reference in the show notes, please.
Okay, so the two laws that hold CISOs directly responsible are HIPAA and the data protection regulation out of Singapore.
Nice.
So HIPAA for the U.S. and data protection regulation in Singapore, and the BDSG. And please, my German, even though living there for 6 years, we think it would be better, but it's not. It's a very long German name. We'll just call it BDSG. Actually states that you cannot hold the CISO directly responsible.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Betcher, you have any questions for Ms. Green?
I have tons of questions, but
well, I think we probably have her back.
I ask a three-word question, and she talks for 20 minutes. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Like I said, I'm taking advantage of the fact I can talk now. So there you go. I don't know if that's probably, I feel bad for the poor souls that have to listen, I guess.
No, there's a lot we could talk about with healthcare and with, developing security and maturity. We did a BSIM report on that. I just didn't connect the dots that you guys were involved with that at the time. So that was interesting. So
the BSIM is something I find it very valuable. I highly recommend it. In fact, when I was in Portland talking at a conference last month, I think there's like 150 attendees, and I talked about the BSIM and how we're using it, and they were so interested. And I've gotten so many emails on wanting trying to better understand software security initiatives and using the BSIM to benchmark that. And I still think it's one of the better tools out there, frameworks out there for measuring your software security initiatives. So
very well done. Okay. So Ms. Green, how would people get a hold of you? You mentioned Twitter earlier, but how would they get a hold of you if they wanted to further discuss, maybe get involved with CISO security, or, maybe leverage your services?
Okay. Well, I guess you probably post this, so you can definitely, I'll give you my contact information and you can post that there. But in the meantime, they can reach out to CISOsecurity.io, and there's contact information there on the website. And also you can reach me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Kim1Green.
Oh, good. And you are that Kim Green. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Kim1Green. So I know I actually have had a few last names, so it's kind of funny. People are like, "Who are you this year?" I don't know. Oh. So, but you know what? That's how I stay very secure. No one can find me because my name keeps changing, right? So that's what we joke about. But anyways, so that's the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn, and so you can find me on there. But I do try to respond very quickly when anybody reaches out to me. So hopefully you won't have to wait too long. Right, unless you're you, Brian, and then you have to wait 3 months.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Not a problem. Are you going to be speaking anywhere? I know you do a lot of travel. You going to be speaking anywhere in the next 2-3 months?
Well, it's funny that you were mentioning Patrick at Dropbox, because him and I were actually on a panel at SINET a few weeks ago. I'm speaking at the IC West Forum conference next week, I think. I'm going to be speaking at the Kleiner Perkins CEO workshop on July 19th. So basically, all of the CEOs from all the companies that are being backed by Kleiner Perkins hopefully will be there. So that will be a great opportunity. And then I'm speaking at something in October. So that's all I have on my plate right now. But it's kind of a lot, and a lot of fun things going on. And this is kind of worth mentioning. Is my first year. I'm going to miss Black Hat in 6 years. So that's kind of sad because I always like to go, but not necessarily for the sessions. I go to party with all my friends that I haven't seen from around the country for a week.
Hallway con. Totally understand.
Okay.
Totally understand.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Betcher, if somebody wanted to contact you, how would they do so?
I'm also on Twitter at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, he's also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot on LinkedIn other than, contact Miss Green and ask her for, help. But I'm on Twitter. You can follow me at Brian Brake, and the official BrakeSec podcast Twitter account is at BrakeSec, BRAKESEC. I just put out the stage 4 clue. So if you are wanting a free ticket to DerbyCon and you want to, help out, do that, you can get involved with our CTF. I call it a CTF. It's more like a, hey, just get to the next flag kind of thing. But we've got about 11 people who've gotten to the CTF so far, stage 4. It's pretty fun. It's actually stretching our skills as people who don't do a lot of that stuff. So, we've still got plenty of time to get involved. I think our stage 4 and stage 5 will go out around the 1st of July. So if you are wanting to get a free ticket to DerbyCon, you can go back and listen to our past episode 17, and find out how to get that started. We're also doing a drawing. So if the instructions on how to enter the drawing are there as well. Thank you to our Patreon members, like Miss Sunny, who's involved in our CTF. She's doing quite well. She's made it to stage 4. Everybody else who's donated money just to support our podcast, we're very humbled at that. So, that people would do more than just leave a tip in the tip jar. So it's pretty awesome. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We're on Google Play Store. We're pretty much everywhere. TuneIn Radio app. You can listen to all the episodes on internet radio there. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, maybe you want to, tell us something that you do for a podcast, you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. So that was it for this week. Miss Green, I say it to everybody, but it doesn't mean it's any less true. We would really love to have you come back on sometime if you've got a topic of interest you'd like to discuss, maybe something from a recent talk or a blog post that you would love to come on and discuss with us. We'd love to have you on again.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that I can. Right on.
All right. Well, Mr. Betcher, I will see you next week. And you take care, Miss Green and Mr. Betcher. And this was Breaking Down Security. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.